What's up everyone? In this video I want to show you guys a product that you may or may not know about, but we have been using it in the shop both for full-on builds to just adding an accessory or two to an overlanding vehicle. This is the MSD solid state relay. This is the high current version and it has 4 outputs. So typically if you came to the shop and you wanted 1 or 2 accessories, or for the sake of what we're talking about, 1 to 4 accessories because the MSD does 4. I would start with some mechanical relays, kind of like this. This one's a pre-wired relay. It has a mounting tab on it like that, so you can mount it on a flat surface, up on a firewall, under a hood. This is rated for about 80 amps, this particular one, and it's pre-wired, so you would use butt connectors and build a harness off of it, or you can get a pinned version where you pin your own wires and plug it in. But regardless, that's about the setup of 1 mechanical relay. So the equivalent of the MSD is 4 of these mounted. Then if you have 4 accessories, I would say if you have 1 or 2 accessories, I'll probably use an inline fuse like this over at the battery so that the circuit from the battery to the mechanical relay is protected. If you have 4 of these mechanical relays, I most likely will use a small fuse block that will either have 1 feeding wire from the battery, again fused, or I will use a bus bar like this and have 4 individual supply voltages to 4 individual fuses to 4 of these mechanical relays. Once they're all powered up like that, you need to trigger the relay to turn it on. So the way I would wire things, because I don't like hot wires running all over the place in the vehicle, I would splice the supply voltage and the trigger voltage of the switching mechanism inside the relay together. Then I would supply ground to 1 to 4 toggle switches, and when you turn the toggle switch on, it would supply ground to the other side of the switching mechanism in the relay, and then supply voltage to the accessory. This is a perfectly fine setup. I've been doing it for years. People have been doing it for a million years. It's an art form to make it look good and be safe and be properly done, but it can be done and it does look good and it does work good. And a lot of people like how simple it is. So average people may not understand how all that works, and they may not be able to do it properly and cleanly and safely, especially if they're just a hobbyist and they're not doing it for a living. So this MSD relay setup is a really good solution for average people as well as full-on builds. But let's start with the average people and typical customers that would come through here for a quick accessory upgrade. So the MSD relay has these 4 outputs, has a large supply voltage input, it has 4 ground triggers and 4 positive triggers, and then it has 1 little trigger over here that you would use probably like an 18 gauge wire just to ground the switching mechanism inside of the relay. So in the average use case, you would hook maybe a light bar up to this and maybe a radiator fan to it. You would set up a toggle switch, just like I said, that would supply ground to this. So that's the safest way to get a signal to this and trigger that accessory to turn on. Another situation where you would use ground as a signal is if you have a radiator fan with a grounding switch. It's going to be a temperature rated mechanism that once the coolant gets to a certain temp, it'll ground the switch, which you would have a terminal on that, which you would run a wire from that terminal to this trigger and it would turn your fan on. The cool part about this thing is that you don't need a fuse anymore. This is load protected and temperature protected. So if it's overheating or if you go over the 35 amps, this will shut down the terminal that applies to. There'll be a little LED indicator that tells you what the fault is. There's 3 different versions of faults on this. It's in the instructions. But you power it down, power it back up, and it will reset that faulty output. assuming you fix the problem. So for the average use case, this is really awesome for someone just trying to add some accessories cleanly and safely to their vehicle. And even if it's not 4, it gives you room to safely add to it in the future. If you're doing a full build, for example, that has maybe an LS swap in it, and you have a Holley or just a standalone harness, even on a truck ECU or a Phytech or anything like that, typically you have fan outputs, fuel pump outputs, transmission fan outputs. These outputs are not meant to actually have the accessory on them. They're just switching outputs. So you would run those outputs into these positive triggers on the top row here. And so when the ECU, whatever you have to set the engine temp to, once it hits it, it'll send a 12 volt trigger out into one of these positive triggers and turn your fan on. Same thing with the transmission. If you do have control of your transmission through your ECU, you typically will have an output for a certain temperature setting chosen by you, and this can turn that on and off. Now, the other thing that I really haven't used this for yet, but I'm excited for the day that I do, is you can pair up 2 of these terminals. Again, they're both 35, so that's 70 continuous amps. If you just pair 2 of these together, both on the load side and the trigger side, which is really impressive for something that has no fuses, no clunky harnesses or anything like that. This is just a very clean supply voltage, 4 outputs and 4 triggers. I love this unit. I hope you guys find use with this thing. It has a few more details that I probably didn't cover, but that's the basics of it. Now you know about it. Hopefully this solves some problems for you. If you're watching this video right after it came out, I'm actually going to be donating one of these to the Wheeling for Warriors raffle. It's coming up, I think, in the end of May, but tickets go on for sale this Sunday. I'll put the link for that down below, as well as the link for this if you're interested in one of these. And yeah, buy tickets to Wheeling for Warriors and come have a good time. It's the best raffle in the world, and you can win one of these.